Welcome back to FM Storey. Today we've got another video where we're giving a club £1 billion. Again, we're going to let the game choose who gets the money based on the season preview at the beginning of season 1. The side predicted to finish bottom of the league will get the £1 billion. Will they be able to make it all the way to the top of the league and challenge the likes of Bayern and Dortmund? In the series so far, where we've given £1 billion to the worst team in the league, they've burned through the cash pretty quickly. Both Ajaccio and Cremonese blew through the cash in less than 10 seasons. Will the money last longer in the Bundesliga? It'd be interesting to see if they look to improve their infrastructure to set them up for the long term, or if they go gung-ho and splash the cash on transfers and wages as soon as they can. We're going to start looking at the situation at the beginning of the first season and then come back at the end of each of the first 5 seasons, and then at regular intervals as we look to see how successful they've been and how long the money lasts. Before we do get started, if you do enjoy the video, please let me know in the comments and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And without further ado, let's get going. So the money in the Bundesliga is going to go to Bochum. As you can see, predicted to finish 18th in this first season. Quite a big difference in their odds, in the odds between Werder Bremen, predicted to finish 17th, and them predicted to finish 18th. Looking at them, decent sized ground, so hopefully it shouldn't bleed cash through not being able to make it back in matchday revenue. In terms of the history, they've won the Bundesliga 4 times, including in 2021 before they were promoted. Last season they finished 13th in the Bundesliga, so the fact that they predicted to finish 20th is a bit of a concerning thing. In terms of transfers, they've already spent 215,000 on a lot of players, a lot of loans coming in as well. I would imagine that not an awful lot will happen in the summer, but I think probably in January of the first season you'll see them start to splash the cash to bring players in. In terms of wages at the club, no one on really ridiculous wages. We've got 6 players on 10,000 a week or more. Again, come the end of the first season, I would expect to see probably double that on that. It will be interesting to see what happens, because the German league, I feel, apart from your Bayern, Munich, and even your Dortmund and Leipzig, the rest of the league seems fairly even financially. So I could see them sort of finishing mid-table, maybe in the first season, and then it just depends on what they do, what they invest their money in, the players they sign, how quickly they burn through that cash as to what will happen in the rest of the experiment. But we'll be back in a second at the end of season 1. We're at the end of season 1, and as we can see, Bochum finished 15th in the league, although they were fairly safe in terms of the relegation and the playoff, as they were 8 points clear of all 3 of those spots, but not the best start. They did score the least goals in the league. So transfer-wise, as we suspected, they didn't do any other work, any other business in the summer. And then it was in January they signed Kevin Ehlers as a centre-half, Mattia Viviani in the midfield, and Ron Schellenberg in midfield as well. They spent about 4.1 million all in on those deals in January. The wages, as we said, at the end, before the season started, there was 6 players on £10,000 a week or more, and now there's 10, so it's almost doubled. And as far as the bank balance is concerned, they've actually made £22 million profit during the year. So they've gone from £1 billion to £1 billion and 22.5 million. I don't think that will last for very long, and I suspect that we'll see a massive drop at the end of season 2 once they've had 2 full transfer windows with the money to spend. So we'll be back at the end of season 2 in just a second. We're at the end of season 2, and as we can see, Bochum finished in 16th. Now, there's no R showing there, so they did win the playoff against Hanover. They won 3-2 on aggregate to stay up for another season. I mean, when you look at the way the form went, they didn't start very well, and then they picked up, and they were mid-table for a chunk of the season, and then they collapsed right back down towards the bottom of the table, and basically didn't budge from 16th for quite a long while there. They were the 2nd worst in terms of goals scored and 3rd worst in terms of goals conceded. So again, you can obviously see why they were down where they were in the league. I mean, so the start of the season wasn't actually that bad. They drew 2 of the first 4, then picked up a couple of wins. But it's this run from the beginning of November, when after they beat Dortmund in the the DFB Pokal. But starting with the defeat against Bayern in the league, all the way through to February, where all they did was draw 2 games in the league and lost every other league game. They also got knocked out of the DFB Pokal on penalties by Freiburg. Then they got a couple of wins, which obviously quite necessary, otherwise they would have been in real bother. But then 3 losses in a row. They ended the season with a couple of draws and then managed, as we said, just to avoid the relegation in the playoff against Hanover. Transfer-wise, they spent 10.75 million. They did bring players in on free transfers, and the real big money signing, the only real big money signing, 6.5 million on Enzo Biomo, another centre half, who was okay for them. Looking at his season stats there, they didn't really go big in January. They signed a couple of players from Hoffenheim. They signed a player on a free transfer from Leipzig, but otherwise they didn't do an awful lot. And now the wages have really rocketed up. So Ron Schallenberg, who they signed in January of the first season, and I think was on £11,000 a week at the end of that season, is now on £57,000 a week. They've gone from 6 players on £10,000 a week or more at the beginning of the first season to 10 at the end of the first season to over half the squad on more than 10,000 or more per week. When you look at the amount of money they've paid players, and then you look at their average rating throughout the season, there's probably only Enzo Biomo who's come anywhere near being worth what he's been paid. I wonder what that means for them as far as the actual league is concerned. So, despite all of that, they are still only paying the 14th most in terms of salary. They're paying 28 million a year. Obviously, that pales in comparison to what Bayern Munich are spending at £207 million per season. But equally, the amount of money they spent on transfers and the amount of money they're paying some of those players to have finished 16th, you'd have to say a disappointing season. But I suspect this is the way it's going to go. And looking at it, it does have very, very much strong reminders of what happened with Cremonese. They didn't really get a decent start at any point, and then they just fell, and in the end they eventually got relegated. The fact that Bochum have been so close to going down twice in the first 2 seasons, I suspect they're going to go down, and then it's a case of whether they can get back up or not. But we'll find out what happens in season 3 in just a second. And there we have it. We're at the end of season 3, and as we suspected, relegation was on the cards, and they were relegated. They finished 7 points adrift of the playoff spot and ultimate safety. They were worst again in terms of goals scored in the league, second worst in terms of goals conceded, and I mean the highest they got in the league was 13th, but that was only for 1 game, and they never really got themselves out of trouble. They really started poorly and just never dug themselves out, struggling to win games the whole season. November was probably one of the better months. February again, February with 3 wins out of 5. But December they lost every game. April they lost every game. They lost the last 2 games in May. I mean, even if there was a chance of them staying up, the way they finished the season just removed any such chance. In terms of transfers, they spent 10.25 million. Most of that on Burakins. When did they sign? So they signed Burakins on the 12th of August, and he started 1 game for them. 6.75 million on someone who played 5 games in total for you, and 4 of them were substitute appearances. I mean, I suppose at least you've only paid him £7,000 a week, but in terms of the wages, they've exploded even further. We've now got a lot of players on north of £50,000 a week. That is genuinely scary, especially when you consider the performances that we've put in all season. And in terms of how that's stacked up in the league, at the end of the last season, they were in 14th. for what they were spending annually. They've now practically doubled what they're spending annually, and they're paying the 7th most money in the league, and they finished 17th, having scored the least number of goals, and having conceded the 2nd most number of goals. So there's 807 million left in the bank. So actually, after 3 seasons, that's not quite as bad as I was expecting. It's less than 200 million that they've spent out of that bank balance. But having been relegated, and given what they're paying some of those players, I mean, I would hope that there's some wage drop clauses for being relegated in some of those contracts. But unless they can get straight back up, I think they're going to be bleeding money in the next couple of seasons. And this may be another short. This may even challenge Ajaccio and Cremonese in terms of 10 seasons. But we'll see if they get straight back up in season 4. So we're at the end of season 4, and as you can see, Bochum did not come close to going straight back up. They finished the season in 7th with 46 points. They would have needed another 20 points to challenge for promotion and to get into the promotion playoff picture. They did score more goals and did concede less goals. I mean, obviously you'd expect that. They didn't start the season particularly well. Then they had a decent run, and then a bit of a dip, and then basically continued on to where they were. In terms of transfers, they spent 3.9 million. A lot of free transfers coming in as well. Wage-wise, they now have someone on £100,000 a week, and they basically finished mid-table in the 2nd division. I mean, obviously the performances are better, but you'd expect that at the level they're playing at, but given the wages that some of the players are getting. So Darian Marles is the highest paid player on £100,000 a week. They signed him on a free transfer from Inter in the summer. I just don't think this is going to be a successful business model for them. Let's have a look and see where I would imagine they have to be paying the most wages. Yeah. Quite comfortably as well. They're paying nearly 43 million. The next best is Mainz, who went up in 2nd on 27.43 million. Sandhausen, who won the title, are paying nearly just a quarter of what Bochum are paying in wages. Like, they did get off to a really good start. The first half of the season, like up until sort of mid-November, they'd only lost 2 games in the league. Everything was going well. Then, from that point onwards, I mean, they didn't win a game from the middle of November through to the beginning of February. They didn't win a game in March. And that is those 2 runs probably what put paid to any chance of them being promoted again. Hopefully after a season in the division they'll be able to bounce back and go up in season 2. As far as the bank balance is concerned, there's about another 50 million come off that. So they are certainly not going through the cash anywhere near as quick as Ajaccio and Cremonese did. I mean, given the wages that they're paying, I'm surprised they're not going through the cash that quickly. Certainly in the main difference with Ajaccio is Ajaccio signed a couple of players for 30 odd million in both the first and second season, which is probably just on those 2 players is more than Bochum have spent in transfers the whole time so far. So they've been a lot more restrained in terms of that. But if they're going to keep paying people £100,000 a week, they're going to need to get back up into the Bundesliga pretty damn quickly. We're at the end of season 5, and for the second successive season, Bochum have finished 7th in the Zwei Bundesliga. They were closer to being in the promotion picture this season, but still not good enough for considering the amount of money they're paying the players. This season, it seems like it was more a slow start that cost them, and then they picked up, and then from sort of mid-season onwards, they were around 6th or 7th. The 5th best in terms of goals scored, the 3rd least goals conceded. They did also make it through to the semi-final of the DFB Pokal, where they lost to... They did also make it through to the semi-final of the DFB Pokal, where they lost to Stuttgart. They had just got back on level terms before Stuttgart got the winner. Definitely the start of the season, there's a few more losses. October, November, December, there's only one loss in the whole month. Then after they come back after the winter break, they lost 3 league games in a row. And that is probably kind of the run of form that cost them. And then obviously finishing the season, losing 3 out of the last 5. Well, 2 out of the last 5. And then finishing the season, losing 3 out of the last 6 league games, probably put paid to any hope of them sneaking into the playoff position as well. In terms of transfers, they've actually spent more money this season, the second season in the Zweite Bundesliga, than they did in the first. They spent 15.5 million, which I suspect means that when we look at the wages, there's still only one player on £100,000 a week. A lot more in the sort of 30 to 40 to £50,000 a week market. Again, they have to be paying the most in the league this season. Yeah, like by 30 million from Hamburg. It looks as though they may be marooned in the Zweite Bundesliga for a little while. What impact has a second season in the Zweite Bundesliga had? So there's still 682.5 million left. They're certainly not blowing through the cash as quickly as you would expect, having been stuck in the second division. But hopefully they can get back up into the Bundesliga. What we're going to do now is we're going to go forward, and it'll either be the end of season 10 or whenever the money runs out, we'll be back, see what happened. We are at the end of season 10, and as you can see, Bochum made it back to the Bundesliga. They finished 8th in this most recent season. So we can see in season 6, Bochum managed to finish 3rd on goal difference ahead of Fortuna Düsseldorf. He then beat Union Berlin in the playoff and got promoted to the Bundesliga. So season 7, they managed to finish 9th. That's actually the highest finish in the league since they got the money. They finished on 46 points. They were only a couple of points away from Wolfsburg, who'd got the last European spot. They were well safe of relegation or the playoff positions. Season 8, they managed to finish 9th again. Again, this time they were a bit further away from the European spots, but missed out by 6 points there. Season 9, they managed to finish in 7th and qualify for the UEFA Europa League. And in the most recent season, they finished in 8th. There was quite a big gap between them in 8th and Hertha in 7th in the last of the European spots. But again, pretty safe from relegation. So since they've got back up into the Bundesliga, they've mainly been mid-table challenging for the European spots. They've not really been any danger of going down. In terms of the transfer activity that they've done since we left. So, the season that they got promoted out of the Zweite Bundesliga, they did spend big. They spent 40.5 million. I think they probably decided that they needed to spend the money to get themselves out of the division. First season back in the Bundesliga, they spent 67 million, including 18.25 million in January for Ludovic Reis, and 18.5 million on deadline day for Thilo Kehrer from West Ham. In season 8, they spent 26.5 million, including signing Victor Gyökeres. Season 9, 18.75 million. And season 10, they've only spent 4.1 million. So I wonder if that means that the money is starting to run out. Let's have a look at the bank balance. No, so there's still 203 million in the bank. So it's not, they've not dialed back the transfers because of them running out of money or anything like that. They actually made a £20 million net profit in the transfer market in this most recent season. I wonder what they're paying wage-wise. So they're now paying 4 players over £100,000 a week, including Calvin Ramsey. Darian Marles, who they signed in the second division, and they were paying 100,000 in the second division, and they're now paying 145,000 too. And then we've got 2 players on 2 Norwegians on 150,000 a week, Anders Burset and Anders Hartweit Richter. And certainly the latter of the two definitely deserving of his money, scoring 30 goals in 46 games. If we now look at what they've done in the cup competition, so in the DFB Pokal, when we last left off, they made it to the semi-final against Stuttgart. The following year, they got beat in second round by Bayern. They made another semi-final where they lost to Freiburg, and they made a quarter-final where they lost to Darmstadt. In terms of the Europa League, they managed to make it to the quarter-final where they lost to Leicester on aggregate. Juventus went on to win the tournament, but Bochum did have the leading goal scorer in Anders Hartwig Reister with 10 goals in that campaign. So things have definitely picked up there. They've got themselves back into the top flight. They've secured themselves as a top half team. They've challenged for European places. They've made it into the quarter final of the Europa League. Hopefully that continues. Although in the last 5 seasons since we left, they have spent 400-ish, getting on for 500 million. They have upped the money they were paying on transfers, although that did drop this season. So I wonder how much longer the money's going to last. The intention is now we'll come back either at season 15, or if the money runs out, or if anything exciting happens, and we'll come back at that point. But let's see what happens with the rest of this money. It's the end of season 13. As we can see, Bochum are still in the Bundesliga. They finished 10th. There is still some money in the bank, 70 million of the original billion. They've not taken out any loans or anything like that, so they've still got 70 million to spend. The reason we've come back at this point is, as you can see, the last fixture of the season was a 2-1 victory against Lyon, which you can see has won them the Europa Conference League. They won the final 2-1 against Lyon, having beaten Antwerp in the semi-finals, Crystal Palace in the quarter-finals, as did Alkmaar in the knockout round, in the round of 16. They did have to come through the qualifying rounds of the Conference League and made it into the group stage, into the league phase, where they finished top of the league phase, having only lost 1 of the 6 games, and then went on a great run. And what actually seems to have happened is in the second half of the season, as the Europa Conference League form improved, the league form hit a bit of a nosedive, and that's obviously why they finished 10th in the league. Transfer-wise, since we left off, they've not gone back to paying huge fees. So season 11, they paid 8.25 million. Season 12, 475,000. And then this season, where they won the Europa Conference League, 75,000 on a pair of loan players. They did make 35.5 million of one player that season as well. So in season 11, they finished 9th in the league, and they missed out on the Conference League in that season by 5 goals on goal difference. Season 12, they managed to finish up in 7th to qualify for the Europa Conference League. And then obviously this most recent season, as we see, they finished in 10th, but they will be playing in the Europa League next season. Now looking at the wages, still the highest paid players are on 150,000 a week. We've only got 3 players above £100,000 a week now, and actually the wages seem slightly more under control. I think at the end of season 12, they were spending £71 million a season on wages, and I would imagine that's come down significantly for season 13. Yeah, season 13, it's only 58 million, so they've lopped 13 million off the wage budget for the season. They did finish 10th in the league. They're paying them 8th most in terms of wages. I mean, I think you've probably got to say that's about right for where they are. 70 million left in the bank. How much longer is that going to last? I suspect probably only a couple of seasons or more. What we'll do is we'll come back at the end of season 15 and we'll see where everything is from there. So we are now at the end of season 15 and the money is gone. They've not taken out any loans, there's no debts or anything like that, but it is now minus 5 million in the bank balance. So the money has run out. We've reached the end here. They had finished 10th in season 13 as well as winning the Europa Conference League. Season 14 they finished in 11th. Season 15 they finished in 10th and missed out on a European spot by 2 points. Although somehow Germany now have 6 teams in the Champions League, so I imagine one of them must have won it, or won the Europa League. Obviously, having won the Conference League in season 13, they went into the Europa League in season 14, where they lost again in the quarterfinals. So they've made 2 trips to the Europa League and lost them both in the quarterfinals. As far as the DFB Pokal is concerned, they made another semi-final in season 14, but not made it as far as a final. Oh, in fact, no. They did lose a final of the DFB Pokal to Bayern Munich in season 11. And let's look at what they did transfer-wise in these last 2 seasons. They spent 5.75 million for the season after they won the Conference League, and then 12.25 million in this most recent season. We're now down to 2 players over £100,000 a week, and it's the 2 players on £150,000 a week. And the wages have gone back up in the last couple of seasons, so it's gone from 58 million to 63 million. Again, it's only 7th in the league, so finishing mid-table, probably about right. They seem to have, once they've been promoted back from the Zweite Bundesliga, once they eventually got out of that division, they seem to have secured themselves as a mid-table challenging for the last European spot team. And they've won a competition in the Europa Conference League. Now, as the money's run out, that's where we're going to leave it. And that's the end of another experiment where we're giving a club £1 billion. I have to say, this was a lot more successful giving the money to Bochum in the Bundesliga than it was to giving the money to Ajaccio and Cremonese in League 1 and Serie A, respectively. Yes, Bochum did get relegated, and it did take them 3 seasons to get back into the Bundesliga. But after that, they've managed to secure themselves as a mid-table, challenging for European top half team. And they've even somehow managed to make it on and win the Europa Conference League as well. All in all, pretty successful. The one thing with this experiment, you kind of think, taking the worst team in the top division of a country, as we saw with Ajaccio and Cremonese, it's going to be a struggle because the clubs aren't set up to be a success. Ajaccio and Cremonese sprinted through, burning that money away, whereas with Bochum, it seemed a lot more controlled. The money lasted 15 seasons, so half as long gain as the other 2 clubs. We do have another couple of these in the pipeline, with looking at La Liga and looking at the Premier League. If you've got any suggestions for any other leagues that we might want to try, drop it in the comments. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.